So, Robbie, you have been digging around and finding all kinds of goodies around Snapdragon.
Snapdragon stuff is clearly in the works. So we'll start with the 8CX stuff. That's a little bit older news. The couple things we found around the Snapdragon 8CX. First off, I want to say it was like a month ago, probably. I found that original one.
Yeah,
something
it's been
like
about
that.
Yeah.
We might have talked about it on the podcast, but there were finally commits. I don't even know how. I just stumbled on this one, but you know the I'm going to refer to this a bunch, so pay attention here if you're listening.
Write that down.
Write this down. Take notes.
SC7180, SC7180. So that's how, from the beginning, once we realized they weren't going to build Snapdragon ARM Chromebooks off of was it the 845 they started with?
Yep.
So the old Snapdragon 845 at the time when they started years ago, that was
that
was the flagship. That was the main Snapdragon chip that was in like phones and flagship phones. So they started, Cheza was the first board. They started with developing with that chip and did that for a while. And so we were like, okay, after about a year and a half, it's like, are you really going to launch Chromebooks with 845? It's weird.
Yeah, because we were on the 855 had launched, and then we were on to
coming out. This 865 was coming out.
Right.
The
next thing you know, it was 888, and it's like, man, this thing's
way
old.
behind. Well, then they switched gears, and this other board showed up called Trogdor. That was back when we were still officed at Joe's house.
Joe's favorite.
I remember
doing podcasts in the living room, talking about Trogdor, and we weren't sure exactly what that transition was going to be, if that was an additional thing or whatever. But then eventually we tied SC7180 to that board, and then that December 2019, I believe, they did we talked about this again on this podcast, the Aloha Rich. Snapdragon Summit, where they said aloha.
Aloha!
Oh man!
And
every time they stepped on stage.
And again, we talked about this as well. They talked about always connected, these lightweight devices, but they didn't mention Chromebooks. But there were enough pieces in what they had to say and what we've seen to put it together. We figured out, okay, the SC7180 is Trogdor and is the Snapdragon 7C compute platform that they're talking about, because they kind of made compute platforms that they were messing around with different ones.
Right.
Yeah. It was almost like they were putting phone chips into laptops.
Right.
That's what they're doing. So they were like, okay, let's make sure that these compute platforms are made for computers.
Right.
So digging a little bit, there's no boards related to it just yet, but they're upstreaming stuff for these SC8180 chipset.
Yeah.
Adding things to it, adding abilities to it. So we wrote about that a little bit ago, and it was like, okay, clearly this is Snapdragon 8CX stuff here, which is exciting. Even if it was Gen 1, the 8CX chip was really powerful. It was built that one. I think that the first one was built on the same architecture as the 888. I think so. I think the 8CX Gen 2 is built on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1.
Gen 1, yeah.
Both of which are insanely powerful mobile phone chips. And so that was exciting to see that. It's like, cool, even if Gen 1 comes, I think it's going to be a massive thing for Chromebooks. It'd be in that vein, I think, of the Companio 1380.
Right.
If not, maybe a little more powerful. Hard to say.
It's going to be flagship Chromebooks regardless.
Top-end kind of stuff, great battery, nice performance, all that stuff. So the latest thing I found in that vein was now a few commits mentioning, getting drivers and support for all these things for a couple boards. A couple of them are clearly just like reference type stuff, so that they can probably add drivers. I don't remember the specific. One of them was the board that came before the 8CX, whatever they called their compute board. But there was instead of 8180, there's 8280 XP. Well, I did a quick search for that, and that is listed. Actually, there's like a Lenovo ThinkPad 13. That's an Windows ARM.
Really?
Yeah. And like all the listings, and I think even the Amazon listing in the title of it.
That's what it
with Snapdragon SC8280 XP, and it's the Snapdragon Gen 2.
Sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Now, so that was exciting because it's like cool. Like clearly they're adding all the stuff they need for the Gen 2 already as well, which the Gen 1 could have just been laying the foundation so that they can build on top of it. We don't have any boards connected with this, and so that was very cool.
Yeah.
And then you start looking into the fact that if they're able to quickly, in just a couple commits, go ahead and start adding stuff to start thinking about Gen 2, Gen 3 just came out. I think there's a device with Gen 3 that launched in March or May or something like that. And it's a pretty big step up from Gen 2, and Gen 2 is a big step from Gen 1. So, I mean, one way or another, we're going to be getting Snapdragon 8CX devices at some point. Now, that all has to be tempered.
Wait, finish your sentence, then we'll tell you which word you
with
need.
the fact that the 7280 has been in development after I looked this 18 months now.
Right.
Like
it's 18
So yes,
months.
our expectations need to be tempered. Yes.
So yeah, we got to temper our expectations along with like, oh cool, this is showing up.
Right.
Hold on, pump the brakes.
Yeah.
It may be next year before we even start to see devices getting attached. I don't know. I don't know enough about how these ARM boards are built and developed. But it does seem to me that Qualcomm's platforms are pretty backwards compatible because they started all of this with the 845, which has nothing to do with the 7C. Core-wise, layout, none of that stuff. So for them to do, there's still commits going on where they're playing with the 845 board to add stuff for Snapdragon.
Yeah, and that makes me feel like this is probably dumbing it down, seriously dumbing it down, but I used to build my own custom PCs, and you had your socket for your CPUs, and then you had your CPUs. Most x86 CPUs from that generation would work on that socket. You just have to have a socket that matches that. It almost feels like whatever the base is for those SoCs, it's interchangeable. They just have to tweak the actual chip itself. So hopefully that means the generation 8, all they have to do is the minor changes, and then they can just quickly ramp up production, because it'd be awesome to see within 6 or 9. I mean, that would be really stretching it. But 9 months from now, we have a Duet 3 style device with a low level Gen 8 chip, and then a Acer convertible that's right there with the 1380 or better. And that'd be great. So here's the big question. When Tensor C arrives, because that's what I'm naming it, the Tensor Chromebook chip. I've already done that.
I like it.
Patent pending. Do we want
TC?
TC. Do we want
TC01.
just full throttle power as much as you can get, or do we want something more like this where you're middle ground with a ton of battery power?
I think if they want to make it for the Chromebook audience, it's the latter.
Yeah, like the Pixelbook Go kind of method. Just make an ultra premium hardware that has power enough for your average consumer.
And it's Google. They'll pay attention to all the external.
Do a Max version or a Plus version or whatever.
They can do
a Pro.
Yeah, or a Pro
TC
version.
Pro.
TC Pro.
Seems like
TC01 Pro.
But they could do that. But I think if they're only going to do one, they need to aim for insane battery life.
Yeah.
Because I think if Google's doing anything with this, they're looking at the new MacBooks and going, okay, what part of this can we compete with? And MacBooks have crazy battery life now because of the chips inside of them. So it's like, okay, they're getting power, but they're also getting crazy battery life with it. So you need to combat those things. You need to have power enough to be good at being a Chromebook. So it doesn't need to be Snapdragon 7C Gen 2 level.
Right.
Because honestly, if you put the Tensor that's in the Pixel Pro, 6 Pro, it would blow away any ARM chip. And once you put the battery size that you can get in a Chromebook with that chip,
it's going to be. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching this clip of the Chromecast. If you want to see this full episode, we have a whole nother channel that's just called the Chromecast Podcast, where you can watch this entire episode. But thanks so much for watching, and if you like this, give us a thumbs up, go down there, click subscribe, and make sure to click the little bell icon right next to that so you'll get notified when we put out future clips of the Chromecast. We appreciate you watching. See ya.